I'm Linda Anderson of Anderson Elder Law. I'm here to introduce John Durso, the Chief Retail Banking Officer of First Resource Bank, and I'm so glad that he's here today. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Linda.
Thank you. So you are Chief Retail Banking Officer. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Well, our bank is coming up on 15 years old. It's a local bank based out of Chester County, and we're expanding out into the main line at this time. And we're a small company that happens to be a bank. So when you're that small, we have close to 50 employees. I wear a lot of different hats. So the Chief Retail Banking Officer means a lot of different things. I guess I could summarize it by saying whatever you're going to experience when you walk into the bank, a lot of that I have my fingerprint on, a little bit of marketing, but mainly on the deposit side of the house. Yeah.
So one of the more common interactions between an elder law attorney and families in a bank is using a power of attorney. So in your experience, how can they work with their banks to deliver a power of attorney to a bank properly?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is a bank shouldn't be delivering the power of attorney to a client, okay? Bankers are not trained attorneys. The banks may have a version of a power of attorney that they will ask a client to sign, but the client should not make the mistake of thinking that's an official power of attorney and I've now got power of attorney. That document was made by the bank's legal department to accompany a legal power of attorney written by someone like Anderson Elder Law. But don't make any mistakes about it. That document the bank is providing, it's more or less to protect the bank than it is to give you a power of attorney. We like to work with local elder law attorneys such as yourself, so that when we can identify that a power of attorney may be needed, we'll suggest that you should probably get this in line because things may not go in a great direction in the next couple of years. But then I would turn around and hand them your card or hand them someone's card who's an expert.
So what I would say to the viewers is that often when the banks are giving the option to the customer to use a bank's power of attorney, that's going to be a limited power of attorney just to the bank.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you're referring to someone to a lawyer, they're going to be looking at a general power of attorney. So just to make the distinction between that so the families know about that too. So the other opportunity for families to work with the bank would really be when somebody passes away as an executor. So can you just talk a little bit about the process for when a family member dies and how do they start an estate administration? As the
Well, the first thing I could say is it's always a very emotional time, right? But try to understand that the banks see this all the time. It may be a individualized situation right now for the very emotional executor, but when they come into the bank should be handling everything in a very professional manner, very exact way of doing things, so that there are no mistakes, because sometimes the emotional side of things can lead to some mistakes, right? So the first thing that I would suggest to somebody is when you go into the bank, don't be in a rush. Budget a good solid hour to make sure everything's done correctly. When you bring your legal documents in, don't be surprised if the bank wants to take a copy and send it to someone in the bank's legal department just to make sure it's legit. That would not be a strange thing. But you have to come in with a death certificate. And banks like to see an original death certificate, not a Xerox copy of a death certificate. And usually, when that kind of thing happens, you're going to get multiple copies of a death certificate. Then the next thing we look for is a short certificate, and that is what is really drawn up by the attorney, and that's the thing that the bank's legal department is going to want to review. And it's literally like a half a page of. It's short. It's why we, one of the reasons we call it short. It's literally a short document, and what it does is it explains that this individual is the executor of the estate. So what we have to determine from the bank standpoint is A, did someone pass away? Death certificate. B, who's now responsible to open up an estate account? Well, the short certificate shows that.
Right.
Generally, an attorney like yourself is going to create the estate. Sometimes it uses the deceased social security number. Sometimes it uses a brand new EIN number. If there's a new EIN number, we need to know what that is. And that's what, having these things in line when you come in, a great attorney like yourself is going to have them ready to go. But when they come in, the bank's going to double check all this stuff. I would say that one little piece of advice is that there's a product that my bank has and other banks have as well that make things a lot easier for an executor. And usually it's set up when the estate planning process is happening. There's a type of account that is liquid, we don't have any fees for it. It pays great rates, but it has an abundance of FDIC insurance. And why we like that product is what I've seen frequently. An executor will come in and not know if there's any money in the bank. There was, poor planning done, and they'll come in and say, hey, my father's name is Jim Johnson, and I don't know if he had any accounts here. Here's the death certificate, here's the short, did he bank here? And what they're doing is over a 3 or 4 week period, they're going from bank to bank to bank, just looking for this money, and it's crazy. So we always recommend clean everything up ahead of time, put it into one spot. It's FDIC insured, it's earning good rates, and it's not costing anything. And then this way,
what do you call that product?
Many banks have it. It's called ICS or CDARS, CDARS or ICS. It's offered by a third-party vendor named Promontory. And there's many banks that are part of Promontory's network. We're one of them. And it's a whole nother show on how the insurance can get to the $50 million range. And there's a very distinct way of doing that. But that's essentially how that works.
So that's a great tip, not necessarily for somebody who's dealing to clean up in the state administration, but pre-death, getting organized, and maybe somebody who's a power of attorney and really looking to get organized.
Yep, because in that case, they can come in and we just flip it into an estate account.
Okay.
And there's no running around.
Okay, so that's interesting. So just stepping back just a little bit more for the person who has had a death in the family, it sounds like someone could go to the bank and actually have circumstances where we have joint accounts, transfer on death accounts, or accounts that are in the person's name alone. So you really have to figure out what you're looking at with a number of things.
Yeah, and there's frequently confusion when it comes to a CD or certificate of deposit that is payable upon death to a specific person.
Right.
Right. So we're not going to review a will.
Right.
Right. We're not going to call our legal team and they're going to run in and pass a judgment on somebody's will. The power of attorney is really for the accounts that don't have a payable upon death specifically labeled on there.
And of course, the power of attorney ends when somebody passes.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So there's sometimes there's a little bit of confusion over which money goes into what pot, but I would recommend in the preparation process, like you mentioned a second ago, if there's specific pots of money that you want to go to a specific person, go in, call the bank, add that in trust for label or payable upon death label to the account, and then put that specific person on there. That way there's no questions from the bank. It's, you get in and get out.
That's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So have you actually seen, when I think about some of the more difficult cases as an elder law attorney, the idea of financial abuse and elder abuse, have you seen any lottery or gift card scams and other things that have come up, obviously?
All the time.
Yeah,
and it's not just elders, but elders are preyed upon the most. Recently we've seen one where we had a person whose spouse passed away a few years ago, and now they're on these dating apps. And the person that they're dating on the app is not a real person.
Oh.
And many times banks are going to take the position of protecting you from yourself sometimes.
Right.
Because we know everything that's going on. You may come in and say, hey, you know what? My new girlfriend who I've met online wants me to send her about $1,000 in Amazon gift cards. How do I do that? We're probably not going to let you even do it. We get to know our clients really well. And again, being in a small bank, we only have 3 branches. We know everybody. We know what they sound like on the phone. We know their kids' situations, and we also know when something's just kind of not right. So we just kind of gently ask, what's the purpose of this? What are you trying to accomplish with that? We may have a better way of doing it, but yeah, we're seeing a lot of cyber fraud. So one of the things we saw, another story we saw recently was, you'd have a grandfather on Facebook, looking after his, just to keep track of the grandkids. Well, the grandkids don't really, for the most part, have an appreciation for cyber fraud, right? So they're surfing on the internet, they're clicking on buttons. Somebody may be able to get into their computer. And what these guys are doing is they're watching the interactions on their social media pages, on their email, and they're just watching the grandchild's activity and who they know and how they talk. Then they'll spoof the email address, or they'll spoof a message on Facebook and go after Grandpop.
Wow.
And say, Grandpop, I'm in college. could you send me $5,000? I need to buy a new car, and I can't get a hold of my dad. And there's always these.
Or dad says no.
Or dad said no, and but you're my grandpa. They're doing that. It's crazy.
That's awful. Right.
I think the things to watch out for. Right. If I could tell you to watch out for anything, there's always a sense of urgency, and there's usually a sense of urgency,
right.
and there's usually a you can't call me.
Well,
I need it now, and don't call me. There's some type of element in the request.
So when I think about the difficulty from the bank's point of view, Pennsylvania doesn't have a mandatory reporting requirement, and banks are also confined by confidentiality. So there isn't always a clear course when you have that. And from an elder law point of view, what I always say to families is that the power of attorney and living trusts are really good incapacity planning tools. And there is a AAA, an area agency on aging in every county that's a huge resource. So even though the banks can do certain things, and elder law attorneys can do certain things, AAAs can do certain things too, as well as the police. So we have all kinds of resources. So let's just have one big final question, which is, it's really hard to know and distinguish between different banks, and I'm familiar with your bank, and I understand how it really differentiates itself, but how do you, when you think about banks and consolidations, how do consumers really look at banks and distinguish one bank from another?
The other and where they should go. Well, catering to your audience, right, because, there's small businesses, there's large businesses, but it's a million different ways to answer that question. Right. But we're catering to, let's just say, the senior citizen.
Right.
Okay? What I think is a good thing to look for, first and foremost, is the people. Okay, because you can have, every bank invests in technology. They all have apps. We have internet banking and bill payer. And does it look really, really fancy, or does it just simply work and do its job?
Right.
Right. All that stuff is great. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's going to get better and better. But you can't replace a really intelligent banker who cares about you and cares about what your situation is with any of that technology. You just can't do it. So I would say when you're going into your bank, when you have conversations with these people, are they a order taker type of person? Are you able to go in and say, I need a this, and they go, yes, I will get you this, and then they go get it? Or are they going to ask you a question like, what are you trying to accomplish with what you came in here for? Maybe I have a better way to do it that's cheaper, faster, more efficient. So I like to, when we're hiring, I like to hire people who are thinkers, who are going to try to figure out the best way to do things. Then secondly, you want to look for, what do they do with your money when you put it into the bank? Are they reinvesting it in your community, or is it going somewhere all over the country?
Right.
Are they making loans? Are they, making donations to local schools and things like that? Are the people investing their time in volunteering? I mean, to me, that's really important. And then down the list, of course, to the bank is, what are they paying? Like, how good are the interest rates? How competitive are they? Sometimes you're going to have a bank that's not the greatest in the entire country, but they're doing really good things in your community and they're looking out for your best interest, and that might be worth that quarter point difference that you would find online in Ohio.
Right.
But for me, I think it's all about the people and it's all about the service that you're going to get.
Right.
It's all great things to look for.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you, John, for coming in, and thank you for First Resource for sharing you for today. Well, I'm Linda Anderson, and this is the wrap up for our very first web series. And if you would like more information, please visit our website, andersonelderlaw.com, and thanks for joining us.